What up? What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Let's Ask Paul, the podcast where you get to ask me, Paul Abernathy, anything you want about the National Electrical Code and all things electrically related. Thanks for joining me today on the podcast. If you've been listening, we also have another podcast called Master the NEC Podcast. So make sure you look for that on all your popular podcast listening platforms. Just search for Master the NEC Podcast and you'll get it. And we have over 1,000 episodes of all different types of topics. You can just kind of go through there and listen. It's great to listen in the shower, believe it or not. Bluetooth devices in the showers, I do. Maybe too much information. But you can also listen on your phone, stream it to your car player. You can do it on the job site, your earbuds, whatever. And we have all kinds of episodes for all different things. So make sure you check that out. And do me a favor. Give us a like, a thumbs up, or share it. Again, it's a little thank you. If you like any piece of the content we provide, please share and let other people know about it so they can get some good information as well and all learn the National Electrical Code together. How about that? So when it comes to the Let's Ask Paul podcast, you can actually listen at paulabernathy.com. You can also listen to both podcasts on our mobile app. You can get both the Let's Ask Paul and Master the NEC podcast. I don't know if you knew that or not, but get our free mobile app. It's available over on our website, fasttracksystem.com. It doesn't cost you a dime. You can also get it at NEC Chat. That's NECCHAT.com as well. If you want to pick it up that way, that's fine. That's sponsored by Wix. Anyway, so today I thought we'd answer some questions that were submitted to the Let's Ask Paul podcast and kind of clear up some questions that people have been asking. Again, I have a backload of these, but we do have some that Darlene has pushed forward to me that we want to make sure that we do cover. And so we're going to do that today. We're going to do our best to try to cover those. All right. The first thing that was sent to me was basically it said, in a crawl space or under a trailer, would you need to install a weatherproof junction box, or could a metal junction with non-metallic junction box be fine? I'm assuming a metal or a non-metallic would be fine. I referenced 314.15, but not sure. Also, I'm assuming any wire coming down would need to be UF rated for weatherproof. Okay, so any cable coming down is probably what you're talking about. If it was a wiring method coming down, then again, depending on whether or not we consider that a wet location or damp location or not, I'll give you my thoughts on that. But if it is a wet or damp location, then obviously we have to use a wiring method that's rated for such. Okay, non-metallic sheath cable, for example, poking it down. If it is a wet or damp location, then you obviously know that you can't use non-metallic sheath cable. And you also could not sleeve it in a raceway in a wet and damp location outside and think that you're can use non-metallic sheath cable, because you can't, but you could with UF cable, and I think that's what he's alluding to. So at the end of the day, what we want to remember is that in that crawl space, or actually under that trailer, the type of junction box or the wiring methods that are used really depends on the environmental condition that it is exposed to. And a lot of this is going to have to be something that the AHJ will look at. I mean, 314.15 makes it very clear. Enclosures and boxes installed in wet and damp locations got to be weatherproof. Have to be rated for the environment that they're being located in. And of course, that would go hand in hand with any of the wiring methods as well, which you could look under uses permitted and uses not permitted of the various wiring methods that you're interested in. And at the end of the day, this is something that it's going to have to be an AHJ's call. Because really, if you think about it, and I'm going to speak from an AHJ perspective on this one. If you have a trailer, these are standardized. And anytime you come out of the envelope of the trailer, whether it's underneath it and you have some skirting around it or whatnot, you're considered outside of the trailer. So I would consider it outside. Now, whether it's a wet location or damp location, that's going to be jurisdictional. I personally think if it's underneath the trailer, it's more damp than it would be wet, right? And we have definitions in Article 100 that gives us some clarity on damp, wet, and dry. But since a trailer like that, like a mobile home or job site trailer, since we're coming out of that envelope of the trailer, coming outside, whether it's on the bottom or on the sides or wherever, then it is outside of that. And so just because I may put some skirting around it, at the end of the day, it's outside. It's just underneath, and it may kick it from being a wet location into a damp location. But this is going to definitely be something that the AHJ is going to have to be worked with, because you know what? They could look at it differently. They might know geographically something different in the area. There may be evidence of flooding. There may be evidence of moisture underneath or whatever. So they're going to be the ones to make the call. For me, I'm telling electricians, look, let's not try to make it complicated. If you're coming outside of the envelope of the structure, then it's going to be either a wet or damp location. Okay. If you use a product that's rated for a wet location, then you're going to by default be okay in a damp location. Something that's rated for a damp location may not be adequate for a wet location. So those are the type of things. Use your best judgment in that. But not knowing more details on the situation or what it looks like, I use the golden rule. If you're going outside of the actual structure, then you're going to be outside. That type of thing. You get me? All right, so that's where we're at on that one. Hopefully that helped you out, at least gave you my opinion on that. So again, thanks for submitting that question over at paulabernathy.com. And you know you can do it also. Just go to paulabernathy.com and simple little form, send it to me, let me know the code cycle you're in, and give me as much detail as you can, and I'll be more than happy to try to give you my opinion on it. Again, my opinion is no different than NFPA's opinion, because they typically give a non-formal, okay, or we call it an informal opinion. Basically, it's just an opinion. No different than everybody else's opinion. I base mine based on experience because I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to use good sound judgment as well based on the condition of use. And so that's important for you to really think about that as well. Okay, so hopefully that helps you with that one. All right, the next question. Let's see, what do we got here on the schedule here? What did she share with me? Okay, the next question it was asked is, it says, is there a code that prohibits an electrical panel under a stairwell area? Okay. All right, so I guess we're talking about underneath the stairwell. Is there anything that would prohibit the application? Well, as far as the National Electrical Code is concerned, there is nothing specifically that would prohibit it. But you do have clearance issues you got to be aware of. So you got to make sure you meet all the requirements of 110.26. Okay, you have your clearance 30 inches in any direction, left and right. You're typically probably going to be 3 feet out. You're going to have your height. So you have to meet all of the requirements of 110.26. Now, that may or may not be something that you can meet underneath that stairwell. But you know what? If it was a room, you stand up and you had the working clearances and you had everything that you needed to have, there's nothing in the NEC that says that you can't put it there. I mean, it's also have to be readily accessible. So again, we'll assume that all of this is in place and you've got the working clearances and it's readily accessible to the overcurrent devices and everything like that, and it's not a closet that's being used with combustible material in it, then at the end of the day, I don't see a problem with it at all. So that's the things that you're going to have to be aware of. Okay, so you got to meet all those clearance issues. You have to make sure and really know the location you're putting. But other than that, there's nothing in the code. Now, the code has prohibited statements, for example, putting panels over stairs, things like that. But you can actually, and even in a stairwell, you could have a panel in there if it's over the landing and you still have the clearances, right? Left and right, in front of it, up height above it. If you have all of that space, then that would be acceptable as well. There's nothing that, now it's prohibited over stairs, but not on a landing. So again, that's just some extra information. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like that would be the most prudent place to do something like that anyway. But you know, hey, far be it for me to tell you how to do your install, I'm saying. But as far as answering your question, no, there's nothing that prohibits it in a stairwell area, except for, again, working clearances and heights and everything that you need to access it. And they're readily accessible and all that stuff. If that all's good, then hey, no problem at all putting it there. Okay. Okay, we have another question that was submitted. And I've actually answered this question in an email to the gentleman. I had to do a follow-up to this. The reason I had to do a follow-up is that, I got to thinking about this one, and And realize that this is one of those questions where you could dig a little deeper. And digging deeper means that we can get way more meaning out of the question. This has to do with EVSE, okay? So here's a question. It says, hey, Paul, thanks for your input the other day. And as always, thank you for what you do to the industry, or do for the industry. I do what I do to the industry. It says, I would like your opinion on on the 2023 NEC Article 220.57 EVSE load. My question evolves around the term nameplate rating. Is a nameplate rating going to be the maximum rating of the EVSE, or does a nameplate rating of the unit adjust to the setting of the unit? For purposes of the service and feeder calculation, does the EVSE with the maximum load, let's say of 48 amps nameplate, get charged to 32 amps of the unit is adjustable to 32 amps? Thank you, and the individual. Okay, so this is a weird question. So I got to thinking about it. So it's pretty clear that the nameplate rating of the EVSE, especially when it comes to that code reference, okay? So 220.57. So for those that aren't familiar with that, that is something that has been added into the 2023 NEC. Now, prior to this, you had to take it into account anyway when you're doing a load calculation. It's typically going to fall under your 220.14, other loads, and you're just going to put it into your calculation because you obviously have to account for it. You just can't say, oh, I don't have nowhere in the code to account for it, so I don't have to do anything. But no, that's not what it says. So I did answer the question for the gentleman, but then I got to thinking, you know what? I need to give you more detail how you may use this in the real world. And so what it says in 220.57 for those out there, all it did was introduce a set wattage value, or VA, watts or VA, however you want to like it. And it's what you use in a calculation, especially if you don't know what type of EVSE, which is electric vehicle supply equipment. If you don't know what it is, it's giving you a default amount. If you know one's going in, if your drawings show an EVSE and nobody gives you the name, the nameplate, nobody gives you the information, right? Then you're sitting there going, okay, I don't have anything to work with. So here's what the code says now. So 220.57, which says electric vehicle supply equipment load. It says the EVSE load shall be calculated at either 7,200 watts or VA, or the nameplate rating of the equipment, whichever is larger. So the question really was asking me, originally the question was asking me is what is the nameplate? Is the nameplate the maximum? And my answer is, and it still will be, that I think that you use the maximum because we cannot control what a end user does. Okay, so if we don't know, it's 7,200 watts. If we do know and it's greater than that, then that would be the basis of the nameplate. Okay, now that is what we would get in 220.57, and that's pretty much kind of what we always had to do, right? It's an appliance. You use when we're looking at it, we're going to use the nameplate because that's all we have. And then again, in our load calculations, like for the optional method, which is probably what you're going to use 99.99999% of the time. In that scenario, it wants nameplate values. Okay, so you're just going to pull that, and you're going to get a pretty good derating allowance as well anyway. Okay, when you're doing that with the optional method, which is what, part 4 of 220. So you're just going to have to treat the EVSE as another appliance. Well, that's what we would do in the real world up to this point. But then the 2023 gave us this 220.57 and said, hey, you know what? I know that an EVSE is an appliance. I get it. But we're going to give you a base value to work with, 7,200 watts, or the nameplate being the value that's posted on the nameplate. Now, the question that I got to thinking about is, what about this allowance in 625 that allows me to say, you know what, if I have energy management system, or I have the ability to adjust it, and it's only accessible to authorized people, and I can tune this back a little bit, do I have some allowance? Well, let's remember a couple things that when we think about the structure of the National Electrical Code, right? You have to remember that at first. So we start thinking about the structure of the code, and we're in Chapter 2 right now when we're looking at 220.57. But we also remember that the EVSEs, okay, is in 625. So that's chapter 6, right? So when we go look at the code and we think about the code arrangement 90.3, what does it say to us? It says the code is divided into the introduction and 9 chapters, as shown in figure 90.3. Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 apply generally. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 apply to special occupancy, special equipment, okay, or other special conditions, and may supplement or modify the requirements in chapters 1 through 7. So I got to thinking about this, and I'm like, this is a perfect example. And I emailed him back because I know that wasn't his question. But, you know, in 625, it's one of those things that you're like, okay, well, how does this play out? I mean, how would we work this in to our scenario of what we're dealing with? And that's when I got to thinking about it. And I'm like, you know what? There are some situations where you'd be able to do that and work that in and be able to realize that, you know, wait a minute, maybe I do get to do something that I normally wouldn't do, right? And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? So if you actually go to 625.42, for example, and it gives you some information, it says the EVSE shall have sufficient rating to supply the load served. Electric vehicle charging loads shall be considered to be continuous loads for the purpose of this article. Okay, we got it. For the purpose of what article? Article 625. It goes on to say service and feeders shall be sized in accordance with the product's rating. Okay, so that would in line with the you don't know, you're using 7200, okay, 220.57. If you do know, then you're going to use the nameplate, okay? That would align it, that the product rating. But it goes on, and this is a significant change in the 2023 where it says, unless the overall rating of the installation can be limited through controls as permitted in 625.42A or B. Now, A is dealing with energy management systems, EMS. Now, for a residence, you're not going to have that. Okay, that's probably not going to be a condition you're going to be working on because then it's going to send you to 750 for and at that point you're like, no, I don't think that I'm going to be dealing with anything that's going to be remotely dealing with energy management systems in a residential application. Okay. I mean, I could stand corrected, and I've seen some big 12,000, 13, 14,000 square foot homes that probably do have an extensive energy management system. But in reality, you might be dealing more with B. Now, B is an EVSE with an adjustable setting. Now, what it says is the EVSE with restricted access, okay, restricted access. This is access to people that will have passcodes, or not just the Tom, Dick, and Harry, not just the homeowner. So if you can restrict this access to the ampere adjusting means complying with 750.30A shall be permitted. So again, I shudder to even mention it because I think most people are just going to use the 7200 or the nameplate and be done with it because you really don't have these options. But let's assume you do. Let's assume you can meet the requirements of 750.30C, which is basically capacity of the branch or the feeder of the service. So this has some things that you have to meet. And if you can meet these, and one of them, for example, is a software that has a password protection that limits the access to only qualified persons only. And let's assume you can meet all this, right? And maybe it's integral. You have one of these fancy EVSEs that has this all integral to it, like Teslas and things like that. Well, let's assume that you can meet that. Then it shall be permitted. So if this adjustments have an impact on the rated label, those changes shall be in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and the adjusted rating shall appear on the rating label with sufficient durability to withstand the environment involved. EVSEs, as referenced, shall be permitted to have ampacity ratings that are equal to the adjusted current setting. All right? So again, you may be able to do this with proper labeling, meeting all the requirements that under 750.30C, even if it's just for this specific EVSE with adjustable settings, then you may be able to dial it back. And we've talked about this. This allows existing services to be able to have EVSEs on it that normally wouldn't be able to be added to it. Obviously, the more that you have, the quicker it'll charge, right? The more current it's going to draw, the quicker you're going to charge this vehicle. But yeah, I might be able to dial it back simply because I don't have the capacity, and it would be able to go on that service. And again, as long as the label, electrician that installs it understands all the nuances, I don't see any problem with it at all. I mean, if you're going to limit the load and you can keep people from mucking it up, then I don't have a problem with it at all. But to answer the general question, we're talking 7,200 as a baseline, or the nameplate, whichever is greater. The nameplate is going to be the direct full amount from the actual EVSE, okay? You only get to worry about this, and again, this modifies and supplements, okay, anything in Chapter 2, provided you can meet all these caveats. If you can't meet these caveats, then you can't use it. You're just going to go with the nameplate or 7,200, whichever is greater in your overall load calculation. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that this one in 625 does permit me some leeway, a leeway on existing services. So it's great to see it if you have this kind of feature built into your EVSE, or if you do have an EMS system. Probably commercial buildings will have EMS systems, energy management systems. Probably industrial facilities may have some of that in it. I doubt any residential will, but you very well could have an EVSE with adjustable settings and meet all the requirements of 750.30c in order to be able to utilize it. And it may be through a simple app. It may be through an interlock system, whatever. You get some options. So I wanted to make sure I followed up that question with that gentleman because, again, I answered the base question, but the more I got to thinking about his question with the reference to feeder and the reference to service, that it was more than just asking about a nameplate, right? Now, one of the things that I will mention, by the way, is that in this example, when it talks about it, notice that it says service and feeder in 625.42. That is totally different than you running a branch circuit. The branch circuit to an EVSE, for example, there's no overcurrent protection at the unit, so it is just a branch circuit. It's on the load side of your overcurrent protected device. You don't get the allowance in 625.42 for that because that only applies to feeders and service. So for branch circuit sizing, it takes us back to nameplate or 7,200 to size that branch circuit. It reminds us to treat it as a continuous load and do all those things, typically probably already figured into the nameplate that's on the EVSE anyway. And you're going to have instructions from the manufacturer. Just make sure you correlate them to the NEC versus the manufacturer's instructions, because the manufacturers cannot circumvent the minimum safety standard. They can go above it, but they can't go below it, despite what people want to say. So follow the NEC as a minimum safety standard. If the manufacturer goes above it, then you can go above it. Okay, because if you don't, you might void some warranty with them, but you're at least meeting the code. But you cannot go below it if a manufacturer says you can. Then you need to reach out to them because you're only increasing your liability if you do that. I'm just saying. All right. Okay, folks, that's some great episodes today. I want to thank everybody for joining me on this episode of Let's Ask Paul. And again, you know how you can get involved. All you've got to do is send me a communication by going to paulabernathy.com. And I get it. I talk really fast. So play this thing back and you'll get more out of it the second time. All right. And if you play it backwards, you go to hell. Take care. God bless. See you on the next episode.